Five little-known technological firsts. Number 5. The first public radio broadcast, January 13, 1910. Lee De Forest didn't exactly invent radio. No one person did it, but he did invent the Audion, which greatly improved the existing technology. He also coined the term radio, which has stuck around for quite some time now. In 1907, De Forest was experimenting successfully with ship-to-shore radio communication, and claiming that he'd soon be broadcasting opera performances to all of New York City, and in 1910, he actually did it. Number 4. Mary Ward, the first to die in a car accident. Mary's family had a strong scientific bent, too. A couple of her cousins built an early steam-powered automobile, which they liked to rumble around in at hell-raising speeds approaching 5 miles an hour. Out on a ride with them one day, Mary was thrown from the car while it was going around a bend. She fell directly under a wheel and broke her neck, thereby becoming the very first automobile fatality. Number 3. Telstar I, the first communications satellite. The first privately sponsored space launch on July 10, 1962, led to the first global television broadcast 2 days later. Telstar I, a satellite owned by AT&T, was launched into orbit on that day by NASA at Cape Canaveral, the result of an unprecedented cooperation between those two entities, as well as Bell, who built the satellite, the General Post Office of Britain, and France Telecom. Images were relayed between Andover, Maine, and Brittany, France, and they were broadcast on both sides of the Atlantic for 18 minutes. The first image was of a waving American flag, followed by portions of a press conference held by President Kennedy and shots of a Phillies-Cubs baseball game. Number 2. The first commercial flight, January 1, 1914. The first flight between two cities and the first to carry a paying customer was between St. Petersburg and Tampa, Florida, on New Year's Day 1914. The journey, which would take a couple of hours by ship or at least 4 by train, lasted a scant 25 minutes or so. Its passenger was St. Petersburg businessman and former Mayor Abramfel, pronounced Fail, we hope, who won the seat at auction and paid the modern-day equivalent of $5,000 for the privilege. Number 1. Xerox Alto, the first graphical user interface. The first commercially available home computer with anything resembling a familiar GUI, a graphical user interface, with windows, folders and a mouse, was the Apple Macintosh in 1984, which was famously adapted by Microsoft for its Windows OS. But don't feel too bad for Apple. The heavy lifting in designing the interface wasn't done by their engineers, but by Xerox. Xerox researchers internally debuted the Alto in 1972, and its features read like a list of everything standard in PCs today. Bitmapped graphics, icons, windows, and the first ever mouse. And the Alto was also the first computer to feature something called an Ethernet local area networking protocol. Being mainly in the photocopier business, Xerox chose not to bring the machine to market in order to focus instead on its bread and butter, a decision which every single player in the personal computer industry would roundly applaud years later.